So the question is, can Bryce make this effect of frost on metal? Maybe, but it's going to be tricky, needless to say. Okay, right, well I'm going to utilise another tutorial that I've done before, and that's this fluorescent electron edge effect, and that's going to provide the material for the frost itself, but to get it looking spiky like, well, it does in this image, like this, I'm going to try and use displacement. Now, displacement in Bryce is buggy, so if it crashes it won't be a surprise, and it also renders very slowly, and one reason for this is Graham Dretz discovered if you don't want it to crash you need to set the priority level to low, and if, like me, using a multi-core processor, then it will cause Bryce to run very slow on rendering. So I'll set the priority to low, I accept that it's going to run slowly. I'm also going to change the document setup so that the size of the image, let's do 500 by 500, okay, and that will keep the render time down. And I'm going to get rid of this infinite plane. I'm going to only introduce very simple elements into this scene. So from the object preset library, I'm going to get something, if I can find it, I think it's under miscellaneous, this trefoil, and that's going to be the subject of my render. I'll just enlarge it, I'll move it away from the camera a bit and zoom the camera in. So we're only focusing on surface detail for this. The material I'm going to use on this, that's just going to be the metal, I'm going to take from one of Horrors and Eyes products recently released and still currently on offer, although I shouldn't mention that in the video because it probably won't be by the time you watch this, sorry about that, is this one, which is the heating room set, and I'm going to use this grey painted metal. I'm going to increase the frequency of each of the two channels just to make it look right at this level of zoom, so I'll set that, I don't know, 5% if I can hit it. 5, 6, 5, oh that's gone to 4, I'll go back and take this down to 4 then. It's a little bit fiddly, this controller, I suppose I should have entered just the figures directly. Okay, and we'll just leave that like that for now, so you can see it uses reflection and some specular response. So let's have a quick render of that. Okay, so far that's my metal material. For the sky in the background, I'm going to use image-based lighting. I'm going to use a backdrop. I'm going to use one of Horror's puddle image. I'm just loading the fairly low resolution one because it's only going to be used as a backdrop image, and I'm going to use true ambience to provide light. I'm just turning the specularity output and the Hdri effect down, and I'm using add to sky, and we'll select render in scene there, turn the quality down. So we're still using the sunlight really, but this will work when we bring ambience in. And I've got to bring ambience in because it's going to be the most efficient lighting method, because I'm going to use premium effects because I need that to get the effect from the specular response for the fluorescent edge that I'm using to get my frost effect. So that's how things are rendering now. Okay, and let's have a look at from above. So that's okay. Right, I'm going to use the render options, set premium effects, set down to 4 rays per pixel to start with, blurry transmissions for the material I'm going to use for the frost effect, depth of field I'm going to set that so that's going to blur the background anyway, so we won't see the background. I'm going to use true ambience scattering correction, and I'm going to lower the maximum ray depth to 4. So let's see how that looks now. So there's going to be some noise in this because of using the lower rays per pixel, but I'm going to have to set this up because I'm going to introduce a feature in a second that's going to really absorb some processing power. I don't want to be hanging about. Okay, so that's my metal. It looks okay at the moment, but now I need my frost effect, and I might consider rotating the Hdri around so that it's got a light background as it appeared in this image, but that's going to be kind of tricky, so we'll do that now and see how it goes. This is a rollerball for the Hdri, but it could be a bit of a handful to set it up and get things looking how you want. So the sun's in there. If I hold the control key down, I can nudge it around sideways. I just want a bit of blue sky and maybe a hint of something in the background like that. We'll give that a go, see how that renders. The true ambience effect, because I'm not using boost light, is just picking this up from the background, so there will be some light as it investigates the background. So this nice light blue sky is going to suggest sort of cold, frosty morning, hopefully. And I can always modify the sun angle to suggest it's low on the horizon. I pitch the sun down, because that's going to be the light source that provides all the light in this, the direct light in this scene to drive the effect. So now I'm going to just go switch to the overhead view, and I'm going to copy and paste that and move it slightly back, the new version, from the front of it, but not too far back, only very slightly. The one thing you don't want is the meshes to coincide, because they'll interfere, but once you've moved it slightly you can't really realign it very. So it's just behind, and I'm going to call that my effect, that new one. And I'm going to modify the material for that to the one that was set up in the tutorial which I showed you a moment ago for the fluorescent edge. But in this case I want the specular channel to be fully white, because it's going to be frost, and diffuse is set to black, but I'm going to set the diffusion down to 0 to avoid any confusion. That should be white, fully white. Okay, so that's going to be my frost effect, and the specular halo channel being fully white as well, and you can see that from this hard edge, will mean when it interacts with blurry transmissions will cause the light to scatter into it, and by having a low rays per pixel will look a bit noisy and hence like frost. The other thing I'm going to have with this material is I'm going to use displacement to create little spikes. So they're only going to be short spikes, so I'll select a displacement of 5, and I'm going to use a procedural texture for this. And if I hold the shift key down I can go into the textures library, and I'm going to select basic spots, and that's, with these high points, will create little bits of sticking out geometry hopefully. And I'm going to turn the frequency of that up to, I don't know, about 700 or 800. So we'll see that hopefully produces lots of little spikes. Now you can already see in the preview that we're running quite slowly here, so I may end up pausing the video while it does its first pass, because what happens when you do displacement is it generates real geometry, and it needs one pass of the render before it's done that. Provided we don't alter any of the displacement settings from now on, the next renders will be quicker. So in this scene we're just still setting up. This first pass is going to be the slowest. As you can see, it's really struggling now, but processor usage is only at 20%, whereas normally with priority set to high it would be at 100%, and of course, as you might expect, it runs anything between 4 and 5 times faster in that case, depending what Bryce is doing, because some things are less efficient in their use of the processor time than others. So yeah, it seems to be making heavy weather of this, but I need to let it go all the way through, at least this first pass, and then from then on whatever changes I make are going to be more efficient. So I'll just pause the video at this point and let it get on with it, and then I'll come back to it. Okay, that's got through its first pass, and now it's a little bit faster, and it's predicting an hour-long render time, but obviously that's not a good guide because of having to have the first pass, and you can't really see what's going on yet. So I'll just stop it there because things aren't set up yet. Now you may remember from this video, the fluorescent edge effect, this is driven mostly by specular. So what I need to do is provide from my light source, which is the sun, a good specular output, but that is going to mess with the metal material. And so what I need to do now is go back to the trefoil, modify the metal material so it's not overly responding to the specular effect. Now that's one way of doing it. As it happens, Bryce has a nice feature, so we could still have the metal as it was, still have the sun as it was, and then we could introduce another light source at the risk of slowing things down still further, which is only keyed in to the channel that we need. So we can make it only focus the effect by using the influence control. So I'll edit this radial light. We don't need any diffuse output. I'll leave it as specular. I'll turn it to no fall off, so that'll provide lots of light. I'll turn cast shadows off, so that'll make it more efficient. We'll just see how that's affecting it. Possibly that's going to be too high. I don't think I'll get a very good preview from this. And include only the effect, so that's just targeting the effect. It looks like it's going to be rather too bright, so I'll turn that down. And then I'm going to position that, well, I can position it anywhere I want really for the effect, and so that will be stimulating the effect layer that's going to be our displacement frost effect, and I can have ordinary lighting on the metal. So that's using the include exclude feature. And you can see now rendering more quickly because it's had its first displacement pass, which allowed it to generate the geometry, and you may be getting a clue as to what this frost is going to look like. Now the question is, do I want shadow casting on that? So that's the key question, because if I turn cast shadows on, it's going to make it render more slowly, but it should look more realistic. So yes, that's increased the render time a bit, but I think possibly it looks a bit better. Now for a guide to what's going on, I'm going to try and render a little bit to see whether this is looking how I wanted it to. Difficult to tell at this point. I might move the sun around to provide more shadow, and I can see that it's adding in onto the background on the preview, which maybe, I don't know whether I want that or not. I can always turn the atmosphere off if I don't want any atmospheric addition to the sky, but I quite like the lighter blue, so it's just a matter of getting my frost to look right. I'll try tucking the light in further behind, and I'm just going to go to the effect, because the material effect might not have cast shadows set. Well, it does, so that's not going to be a problem. So I'm just looking at how much light it's getting from the true ambience effect, and because I looked at the material, then it thinks there's been a change, and so it's going to have to do its displacement pass again, and as you can see, that's quite slow. So it's worth observing that if you want to actually get to use displacement. It's a very nice feature when it works, is that there's got to overcome some of the problems with it, and this first pass is this problematic bit where it has to generate the geometry, and once it's generated the geometry from the material, it then stores that for a time. It won't save it, and it'll have to restore it next time you render it, or you do something. It must flush out the cache so it no longer knows about this geometry and has to re-render it. So I'll pause the video again while it does this. Okay, right, it's got past its first pass, so I'm back to asking myself whether this is going to look about right, which is a difficult judgment to make on this scale. Maybe so. What we possibly need is an offset in one direction or another, because if I look at the examples that I've been sent by the difficult to pronounce Grayler mix, then the frost sometimes comes from one side more than the other, presumably due to the drifting air currents. So I might be able to simulate that aspect of it by moving the effect to one side more than the other. Let's have a look. See, if it pokes the frost out in one direction more than the other, it'll look like the frost has gathered on that side. So that's really catching the light there, which might work. It might be nice, I don't know, or it might be just too much. I'll pull it back a bit. So it might be better to increase the effect of the displacement than do that. But if you overdo these effects, then you run into other problems. Well, I don't know, that might be working there. So I think what I'm going to have to do is do a full render to get an impression of where things stand with this, or maybe experiment. Well, go on, I'll increase the effect at the. Have to put up with the trial of it passing over again. So let's see, if I double that effect, that'll increase the size of the spikes by 2. But now when I've done that, you'll see that we're back in the mode where it's got to do its first pass. Pausing the video. Right, that's had its pass now, so let's stop it there and just have a look at a little area. Okay, right, well that's looking quite spiky along that edge, so I think it might be worth giving it a render. What I don't know is if I scale the document size, whether I'll have to do another pass at that. So I'll take it up to 700 by 700. You can see I've not done that much with displacement. It looks like it doesn't need to do another pass because that's going quickly. What kind of render time that's going to give me? Okay, half an hour, and bear in mind that's only at 4 rays per pixel. So what I'll do is I'll pause the video here and we'll have a look at what that looks like when it's done and see if it's anything like the effect I'm aiming for. Okay. Well, possibly because of the fact that we're only using low priority, or maybe due to using this displacement effect, the prediction for the render time was well out. It's only taken about 5 minutes so far, and it's almost halfway through its final pass. So it's not going to take as long as I thought, but I can see from this that it needs a little bit more work on it before it looks like frost. It looks like hairy metal at the moment. Maybe these are too long, or maybe the spot function is not quite right. So we'll go back to meddling with the material. Right, that's the of material now. I'm going to push it further back so that there's less frost on the front of the metal, and move the sun around a bit so we can get some more light on the metal itself. You can maybe see what it is a bit better there. So that's made the sky go a bit darker, and the lights behind, so I'm going to move that off to one side a bit so it favours light on one side and not the other. That light source, we have got cast shadows set. Maybe it's a bit bright, I don't know. Let's put it down to 4, because obviously it's picking up so much from its environment anyway. And then if I get my effect material, I go into the material lab and edit this. Let's see, there's my output. I'm going to clip it so it's a bit stubbier, so there should be blunter bits of frost, hopefully. And I'll take the displacement down to 7. See how that looks. Obviously, now I've modified that, it's going to take a while to get through its first pass and generate its geometry. I wonder if there was any way of doing this faster, because it doesn't need to worry about the render side of things, it's only the geometry side. So let's experiment with that. Let's go to default rendering, take the premium effects off, see if it goes through its first pass. Yes, I wanted that go faster, and then it'll overcome this first bit of geometry generation. Then we can switch back to the premium effects. Obviously all the things in the lighting are not going to work, but we'll just see if there's a more efficient way of approaching that. Certainly wouldn't want to do it with very high raised pixel, because I'm not going to use this part of the render. I'm just getting through the point where it's generating geometry, because I want to have a little plot render looks at the surface here to see what the frost effect is like. It's still taking a long time on this bit. I'll pause the video again. Okay, it's got through at that. Now I'll just stop it there. Render options, turn premium effects back on blurry transmissions to ambient depth of field, and then I'll just render a little bit here and see how it's looking. So I want to see the edge there, see if it's looking like it's catching the light. I don't know, I think I might need more light as it happens, so I'll take that up to 8. I'll double that light output to really lighten that edge up, so that the frost is catching the light. What I don't know is what this metal is going to look like from the front here. Hopefully by pushing it back it'll look like it's not got too much frost on it, and it's only on this outside edge where it's catching. I'll just move the sun around a bit more. I can preview its position here. So I want some dark areas. I'll try it over this side, see what it's like there. Of course that's sort of conflicting with the direction I've put the other light source in, which might not be a good idea. Okay, let's have a look at that. Right, considering that it was a bit inconsistent in its render time report, I'm going to increase the raise per pixel, and that should help the rendering of the metal and reduce the amount of noise in the depth of field effect as well. So I'll take it up to 16. That's probably going to predict quite a long render time, but I'll check the clock now and see what kind of disparity there is, because I'm sure it was a lot shorter than it initially predicted. Possibly because of some extra work it has to do with displacement on the first pass. So that's saying an hour, so we'll see whether that turns out to be true. I'll just pause the video. Well, the render was a little bit faster than anticipated, but not tremendously so. This is it's completed. I suppose the effects, it's not too bad in parts. I think maybe it's still a little bit furry rather than ice crystally. And I'm not convinced that having the light source able to shine right through was the best idea. So, because it was only using one of the cores of the computer anyway, I redid the scene back to my original idea of just using the sun. So the metal material on the trefoil, I've set the specular response down to 10, and the sun's response I've turned up to 1000, well 999. So that's 10 times what it was, hence turning the specular response of the material down to a tenth of what it was. And the effect itself is as before with all the settings, but this time by using just the sun as a light source, where it's striking the surface it's stimulating the effect in the effect material, and here this side is in proper shadow, and it's covered up this bit where the displacement effect seems to have gone a bit wonky here. It seems to have lost its way a bit. The mapping on the displacement's not quite right yet and needs a bit of work. So maybe this is the better way to go. As I first started before, I thought, oh, let's be clever and use the influence control. So a little bit more experimentation to do with this feature, and maybe it would be possible to get something that looks spot on, but that's the first experiment that I've made. So I hope you found that video interesting, and I'll have a go at trying to recreate this effect yourself.